Thank you, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Good? Since this is the second last session of the day, I would like to check how many people are actually awake right now. So hands up if you're still awake. All right, most people are. Good work. That means the talks are going good. All right. So a few more follow-up questions. How many of you guys are using Firebase? About 20% of the room. And have any of you used the Cloudflare stores yet in your production apps? Yeah, 1, 2, 3 people, a few of them. Right, cool. So effectively, the talk today is going to be like an extension of the talk Eric did in the morning. So he kind of introduced all of the cool things you could do with Firebase and Angular and stuff. And I wanted to just take that forward and actually show you guys how to use that in your code. A bit about me. My name is Mashhood, as introduced. I am a web and Angular GDE, first of all. I'm actually from Karachi, Pakistan, and I'm over there active in a few communities, including Angular Pakistan, that is the core Angular community over there. There's obviously the local developer groups, GDG Karachi, and I'm also working on OSConf together with our team, which is going to be another conference around web and open source in Pakistan later this year. Professionally, I am the founder of Recurship, which is a startup consultancy. And effectively, what we do is that we are helping clients build prototypes and MVPs, and most of our clients are based in US and EU. So somebody is going to come to us with some idea. It's like, oh no, this is going to change the world, and we're going to take that idea and build something around it. Now, the most critical part around startup when building these products is the time it takes to build the initial product. Now, if you'd go down to the traditional approach, you'd probably spend 2 or 3 months under development, building something, and then pushing it out to production, and then showing it out to users. We'd like to do things a bit differently. So there's this strategy called the lean startup methodology. How many of you have heard of this or used this, all right? Quite a few people. But essentially, it's not really for developers. It's mostly for the people, business people who are designing the strategy. But the idea is that instead of going and building your whole product in one go, you simply introduce it in small experiments. So you take your idea, you break it down into different assumptions, and then you test each assumption by building something very small and very, very minimal work, and just throwing it out there and seeing how people react to it. And this is where Firebase comes in, essentially. With Firebase, it's a hosted service, and essentially you don't have to build anything. You just connect with it and start moving along. And together with Angular Fire and Angular, you can just start building stuff really fast. So I'm not going to go into details of Firebase or Angular. We have had the introductions before. I'm going to go right into and showing you how to actually use them to build something. So usually when we start building products, we just get handed off some HTML and CSS from a designer. And that's what I have today, some HTML and CSS for a potential Twitter. It's a Twitter clone that I want to build. And on the slides, I have a few of the things that I want to create. I want to add functionalities for sign up, log in, log out. I want to be able to add a suite, view all of them, obviously, delete them, like them. You know, the basic functionality that I would all need. And I want to try building all of this in the next 20 minutes, exactly 21 minutes. So how many people here think this is possible to build and deploy in production in the next 20 minutes? All right, 5 people, awesome. Thank you for the vote of confidence. So let's get down to it. I mean, there's not much to it. It's either going to work or fail. So this is my code base, and what I've done is I have scaffolded the code base using Angular CLI, because that's what we do. I use the ng-new command in my terminal. I hope everyone can see the terminal clearly. Yeah? Good? All right. So I've scaffolded the project, and I'm ready to go. So I've changed 3 things in this project. Firstly, I've just added the HTML that I got from the designer. This is just static HTML. This is not linked to anything. I've added the CSS, just some CSS. And I have done one more thing, and that's I've included Bootstrap, because I want it looking nice. So with these three things done, if I go into the browser, this is how it looks right now. So it's just a static single page, doesn't really do anything, but I have all my stuff ready, and now I can start building. So I'm going to start building. I'm going to do ng generate components. So I'm going to generate my first component, and then I'm going to generate my second component. So I've decided that this particular app initially will just need 2 components. I need somewhere where I can sign up and log in, and I need another component which is going to have all the other functionality, including adding the suite and viewing all of them. So these are going to be my 2 components. I can start organizing code in there. So let me start from here. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to move this into the auth HTML. And then I'm going to come back. Don't need this anymore. And I'm going to take the rest and move it into the Zwitter component. That's where it's going to live. All right, so that was easy. I'm going to obviously move the CSS and stuff as well, because we need that in the Zwitter component only. And one small adjustment I need to do here is I'm going to introduce the items as, so right now it's just some dummy data, just so you can see the stuff. And we don't see anything because we haven't configured the routes yet. So we're going to go and configure the routes. We're going to have 2 routes, obviously. We have 2 main view components. We're going to have the route for the login page, which I'll leave to the default. And the component is the auth component. And we have the Zwitter component living on the Zwitter and Zwitter component, right? And if you go back, we can now see the login page and the sign up page that we'll use, and the suite page that we'll use, right? So our application is starting to take shape now. Now comes the interesting part. We want to start integrating Firebase from this point. So what do we do for that? We just do npm install Firebase and Angular Fire 2. So Firebase is the base library, the SDK. The Angular Fire 2 is the wrapper on top of that will actually help me integrate this with Angular. So we're going to do that, and while this is running, we can go into Firebase. This is the console. We've seen it before, and we'll just pick up the configs from here for this project. And I can go into my environment, and I can just start adding this over there, Firebase. And I also want to do it in my prod environment because I'll be pushing right away. All right, so that's my basic config done. Now I want to go into my app module. So all of us are Angular developers. We know if you want to add a library, it always goes into the app module. We've got to import a bunch of stuff. So we've imported a few things, including the forms module, because obviously we've got to play with a few forms. The environment, obviously, we're going to get the config from, and the Firebase stuff that we want. So we're going to add that into our imports as well. Oops. And we're essentially importing, we're initializing the Firebase module, and we're initializing the Firestore and the Firebase auth module. So these are the 2 things we'll be using today. If you want any other stuff, like the real-time database or the notifications or anything else, you obviously include that module. So that's done, and that was it for getting it configured into our app. That took about 2 minutes, I think. And I think that's pretty strong. So if you're integrating a back-end service, a complete service, which has some pretty awesome capability, including offline syncing, and that was all the setup that was required. So I'm just gonna have a quick peek here just to make sure that I haven't broken anything, and it looks like I haven't. So now I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna start adding the functionality here. So I can go into my auth component, and this is my login page. Let's start coding this in. So I'm going to create a form variable so that I can reference this in my template. And I'm going to give this the directive for ng form. I'm going to make these into ng model, and we all know what this does is essentially creates an object with email and password with their associated values, and I'm going to pass this object into both these functions, which I'm going to write in a second, which will effectively do all my work for me. Sign up, and I need form.value, and I need form.value. All right, so that's my view wired up. Let's move into the auth component and start wiring that up. So I'm gonna do some imports again. I need the router, so once I'm logged in, I can automatically go into my Twitter component. I'll need my Firebase auth so that I can do the authentication, and that's pretty much it. So I can start wiring this in. Auth is Firebase, Angular Fire auth, and then router is router. All right, and over here, now this is not the best way to do it, but since I'm short of time, I will do this. I'm just going to check. I'm just going to check the auth. So this .auth state, and I'm going to see whenever this is a valid state, it exists, I'm going to assume the user is logged in, right? You probably want to do an auth guard for this, but we're just trying to save time here. All right, and if we have state, then this .router.navigate, and we want to go to the Twitter page. Okay, so that's the auto redirection that I've configured. Now this is going to launch. It's in the constructor, so it's going to trigger once when I load the page. If I'm logged in, it will automatically log me into the. It's going to move me into the Twitter component. If I'm not logged in, whenever it changes, so we've done a subscription, so it's an observable. It's going to redirect me to the Twitter component whenever I've logged in. And now for the interesting part, the actual login code. So we have two functions here that I've added. One is the login function, which takes my form, email, and password. And all I have to do is call this function sign in with credentials and pass it my email and password, and this is going to sign me up. This is going to log me in, sorry. And same way with sign me up, I can use the create user email and password to sign up. And that's basically it for my sign up and login functionality. I have to go into my console, and I have to make sure that my authentication is enabled. So over here, I get the chance to show you guys all the awesome ways you can actually implement sign-in stuff with using Firebase. So right now, I'm using email and password, but you could use any of those in your app, and they're equally easy, including like Facebook is known to be problematic when it comes to syncing OAuth stuff. It just handles it. The Firebase SDK handles that, so it's really nice. So we have this done. We have this enabled, which means that if I go up here and try signing up, it's create a user for me, and I'm now logged in as a user. And all I had to do was just one function call. So in order to see that, yes, I actually did sign up, I can come up here and see that I just create a new user that I signed up with. So that was my sign up and login. That took about 5 minutes. Let's move on to our Twitter component. And I'm going to start with the HTML first, just so that we can see what's all going to happen. So we're going to start with the logout function. Click, and I want to call the logout function. We're going to, instead of using forms, I'm just going to use the variable. So it just makes it easier. And I'm going to call input add. So whenever the add function is going to take the input element. This is where we're showing all those weights. The items is going to convert into a observable because that's what we get from Firebase. So obviously I want to wrap that up in an async. And once I've got the object, I just need to replace these with the actual tags. That's it. item.text and item.created@. And over here, oh, actually, just let me do this before I forget. Item.likes. And now I'll just wire these buttons up as well, the delete and like buttons. And I'm just going to do click. And this is the delete button. So I'm just going to do delete and item.id. And click like item.id and item.likes. So in this particular implementation, we will simply be incrementing the likes counter. So we're not actually limiting that user a single like. And I think we're pretty much done here. So if I come back here, I can now start implementing, linking up everything up, and we should be pretty much ready to go after that. So FDB, and I'm gonna call my imports again, and we have the usual ones from before. Obviously, we have the router again in case somebody tries accessing this when they're not logged in. I don't need this static data anymore. I'm gonna have my user and my collection variables here. I'm gonna integrate. All right, so we want auth, Angular Fire auth, and we want our database, obviously, which is going to be Angular Firestore. And in order to save you from some boring stuff, over here, what I'm doing is I have to reference the collection that I'm going to be using in Firestore. So in Firestore, I've decided to call this suites, and I've added some data in so that we can see it when it's linked up. And down here, what I'm doing is I'm just getting the snapshot changes, so whatever's in there, and I'm just putting it into the data that I want. And over here, I'm doing the same thing I was doing in the login page. I'm checking the auth state, and if I have the user, I set it up as a local variable so that when I post something, I have the reference. Otherwise, I navigate to the login page. Yep. So that was straightforward. Now I can start implementing the rest of the functions, which include like and delete. So logout is the easiest. This dot. And you guys probably guessed it already, but it's just single call. I don't have to worry about cookies. I don't have to worry about session. That's all handled by Firebase. Single call, and it just wipes the user data clean from the local machine. Over here, I was taking an input for the add function. I want to obviously do some validation here, checking if input.value.length is greater than 0, then input.value reset the value, of course, and this is the magic part, add the object, and this will effectively add the object that I want. So input.value, I'm going to set as the text, user is equals to this.user.email, created at goes as new date, and initial likes would be 0. That was easy. Like takes an ID string and previous count, which is a number. And what we want to do is we want to increment the number and update our suite object. So we're going to do this dot collection dot doc ID dot update, and we're going to pass in the new object previous count plus 1. And that's it. It's going to take the object and update it. And we're probably seeing a pattern here, so this should be pretty straightforward. I'm going to pass in the ID. I have to declare the ID. But if I call delete, it will delete it. And that's pretty much it. Cool. So we're just going to wait for this thing to... All right, it's already done. And you can see here, this is now, we had some sample data before, but now this data that you can see now is actually coming from the Angular, the Firebase store. And if I come up here and I type hello ng Europe and tweet this, I have added a new item to the database. I can obviously like items, and this is all happening in the background. It's all working fine. It's all very responsive. And obviously, I can delete stuff. I'll just delete this one, and it's gone, right? So it's all working fine. I can also test my logout function. Yeah, that's working good. I can log in this time, not create a new user. So I'm going to sign in with my user I created last time. That's all working fine, too. So we have a functional app in 10 minutes. And now we have another probably 2 minutes to deploy this. So everybody knows that in traditional world, if you wanted to set up a server and deploy this right now, even if you had it backend ready, that was not just possible. I mean, spinning up a server usually takes 2 minutes. But we're gonna get this up running, and we're gonna deploy the whole thing in hopefully less than 2 minutes. So in order to do that, actually one thing I need to do first, and I'll just kick it off in the background because this takes a few seconds. I'm gonna say while I prepare for the deployment, start building the production build. This is gonna create a dist folder, and it's gonna have my optimized code in there. I'm going to install something called Firebase Tools. I don't need to install this, I have this. So Firebase Tools will help me configure this project. So then I do Firebase init, and this will essentially give me all the config files that I want for my project. So I'm using Angular, the Firestore and the hosting to host my HTML files and JavaScript files. And it's going to ask me a few more questions, including which project I want to link to. It's going to ask me the rules file. That's fine. I want my public folder to be actually dist folder that I'm generating right now, and this is a single page application. And I've now set up my project to be deployed on Firebase. I'm going to come back here, and my build is ready. So now all I have to do is Firebase deploy, and if the internet connection holds, we'll have our deployment in under 2 minutes. So just send files to upload, and boom, we're done. It's given us this URL where we can go into, and if I open it up here, we can access it. All right, let's try logging in using that user that we created before. Yep, we're able to log in. We can see the suite I created on my local host. Everything is working fine. So we went from 0 to an app in production, people that everyone can use within 20 minutes. Thank you. And that was basically it. So the idea of this talk was not to show that how to use Firebase and Angular. I mean, we can all figure it out. But the real lesson here is that when it comes to prototyping and shipping products out, we're focusing on these tools because they just help us move really fast. Now, when this thing is in production already, we can start getting feedback, and we can integrate Firebase Analytics and whatnot, and get some real user feedback. Now, this is not a perfect product, but no product ever is. But you can start iterating really fast over and over again on these production builds, and you don't have to worry about scalability or deployments or anything else. So I hope you enjoyed the talk, and in case you have any questions, I've got my information on the right side here. Thank you.